Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 1621. The topic is mindset and the title is Managing Anxiety. Yes, that's a quite large topic to try to cover on a health and fitness podcast, but I did want to discuss it. A lot of the people I work with, I do a lot of one-on-one coaching, and we talk through an online journal or Zoom, kind of like virtual face-to-face. And a lot of people manage, they deal with anxiety. And it's just an overwhelming sense of stress, overwhelming sense of, kind of uncertainty and lack of control. And then that bleeds into mismanagement or inaction when it comes to nutrition and training. It's hard to focus on training whenever you feel like your life is crapping the bed, or you might lose your job, or, something's going to happen to your family or yourself. It's just, your brain is preoccupied. It's overwhelmed. And I tell clients this all the time, is that weight training and dieting are stress. So even I guess cardio too, like most people I work with, we do weight training mixed with cardio. I do help people with marathons and Ironmans and stuff, but even with those people, we do strength training for sure. So training in general is a moment of stress. Having to eat correctly, meaning you're trying to time foods, have the right foods, maybe measure foods, get macros right, that's all stress. So when you are already stressed, your body will not want, and this is reasonable, it will not want more stress. So when you're like, okay, I have time to work out, the body's going to be like, why don't you just sit on the couch? Why don't you just zone out and look at social media for 20 minutes? It's not going to say, oh, yippee, let's go get more stress. So this is one of the challenges people face when they try to ask themselves, do I feel like training today? No. You will not feel like training every day. Stop asking yourself that, because the answer is going to be no. Your body's going to say, how about we go back to bed? So the body is mostly focused on the here and the now. What can I do right now for best survival needs? It's not thinking, okay, well, if I invest into the workout, I'm going to be healthier, I'm going to be stronger, I'm going to have a better mental outlook for the rest of the day. I mean, if you work out decently, intensity, you're going to produce endorphins and you're going to feel great afterwards. So many people tell me this all the time is, man, I didn't even want to work out, but now I feel amazing afterwards. And, and it's, or I wish I always felt the way I did after the workouts, before the workouts. You never will. It's just, that's the way the body is designed. It's designed to manage stress in the here and the now and try to manage it as best as possible by reducing it as much as possible. So you will not feel like training. You will not feel like eating the way that you should eat. You're just not going to feel like your best self when it comes to the aspect of already being stressed. If you are already stressed, you won't want to eat right. If you're already stressed, you won't want to exercise. So you have to do them anyhow. You just have to understand, okay, I'm not going to want to do this, but I need to do this. You don't want to go to work every day, but you need to because you need money, right? So there's a lot of things in life we do that we don't really want to do, but we do them anyhow. We need to treat eating correctly, eating healthy, and training as the same thing. I know we don't want more of those things in our life, but the benefits far outweigh whatever you're saving in the moment by trying, here's 30 minutes where I get to relax. Yeah, but if you spend that 30 minutes 3 to 4 times a week, and all of a sudden you have lower body fat percentage, you're healthier, you're stronger, you look better, you feel better. Now you get to feel amazing 24 hours a day rather than feeling like crap and maybe only getting 30 minutes to extra relax. So it's worth the investment. It absolutely is. But I do understand the challenge to invest more stress when you already feel stressed. So what I wanted to do today was talk about myself and a little bit of things that I've talked about with clients and whatnot. So I'm not trying to cure anxiety in a single podcast. I can't do it. I wish I could. I wouldn't even charge for it. People always say I wish I could because then I'd be a millionaire. I wouldn't charge a dime because anxiety sucks. It's a horrible feeling. So if you can help somebody avoid horrible feelings, man, you just feel good by doing that. So what I want to do today was talk about things that I think through whenever I'm feeling overwhelmed. So I have, my job, which is I own a business and I do a lot of online work, a lot of work with people, which I love. I absolutely love my job. But it's one of those jobs where you're never done with the to-do list for the day. There's always more that you could be doing. Every single day. Every single day, I have to just stop at some point because I can't get it all done. Even if I were to stay awake, even if I were to be awake for 24 hours, I still would have more to do in 24 hours than I would have 24 hours to do it in. So it's always growing. It's always evolving. There's always something to do. And that alone, if you have a job like that, that creates a lot of anxiety. Now, if you're trying to balance that along with, relationships and other demands on life, it's just, like my wife and I, we had to go to the DMV yesterday, and the whole process of all of that and everything we had to do took 3 hours. Good Lord, 3 hours at a DMV. So blessed because I got to be there with my wife. So we were just having fun and looking at memes and chatting. But that's a lot of stuff. Like, it's just life stuff adds up. So it can be overwhelming. So don't try to put your stress in perspective of other people, saying I don't have the right to be stressed. Look at their life, or, this or that. Don't do that. If you're feeling stressed, then you're stressed. So let's look at some things we can do to try to manage that sensation of anxiety, that sensation of, can I get it all done? Can I even control some of these things? Should I do anything if I can't do everything? And oh my gosh, the mind just never stops, right? So what we want to look at, 5 tips for managing anxiety. Number 1, and I've talked about this a lot, but it's always worth mentioning because it's good, is to have priority lists. I talk about having people priority lists and kind of work to do, task to do priority lists. The reason why I think that's super helpful is it lessens anxiety immensely, especially for me, because I work with a lot of people. I have people in my life, and then I have a lot of people as in clients and a lot of people as gym members, just people. So me having a people priority list was very important because through training years of training clients, I would hear, me being a male, so I would orient with some of my male clients, is they would be at the gym, hee-hawing around, talking to people, and then all of a sudden they go home and they're late for dinner and their wife was waiting on them. And I remember thinking to myself, the people you were talking to, the things you were doing, weren't as important as your wife. It wasn't as important as being home on time. And that shows up in a million other ways. But that's something that I thought to myself is I didn't want to do that. And this is before I ever started dating and got married, I was when I have somebody in my life, I want them to feel like they're a priority, they're the number one priority. It goes God, and then me and them are tied, So I have to be my best self to give my best self to them. So there's a little bit of a balance there for sure. But if they were expecting me home at 5, I don't want to show up at 5:10, 5:15 and say, so-and-so caught me at the gym. Somebody tried to ask about gym membership. Somebody was asking questions. I can help those people, but I don't need to help those people right at that moment. So the concept of something being urgent versus important. I want to help people if they have questions, but I can also just say, hey, why don't you just text me or why don't you shoot me an email? I'm on my way home right now and I want to be on time. So just shoot me an email, brutalirongym@gmail.com, or shoot me a text and I'll give my number and I'll answer it later on tonight when I can. And that's great. I still got to help them, but I got home on time. I always wanted to make sure that the people that were closest to me were getting treated as such. There's that phrase, you always hurt the ones you love. Absolute bullshit. Try to, as much as I possibly can, not allow that to be true for me. Now, there's times when, crap happens and you're overwhelmed and what can you do? But if you keep your mind focused on it, you'll hit the mark, you'll do it right way more than you'll get it wrong. Way more. And that lessens anxiety for me is when I have a moment where 2 things conflict. I can either help this person or do another thing for this person. And for me, it's important for me to know, okay, where do these people rank? Not that I'm not going to help the other person. I just need to help them later. So if I have a moment where 2 people need me, I have already decided by having my people priority list which person I help. I don't have to have anxiety over that. I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to have, a huge spike of fight or flight feelings in that moment. When that moment comes up, I'm oh, okay, I just do this. I've already decided. I'm already done. No anxiety. It's very, very helpful. And then also to-do lists and tasks. That's something that people mismanage all the time, all the time. So one way that shows up is people have, I'm going to train at X time today. I know I can train during this time. Well, before that time, they have this task, and then they're like, well, maybe I can fit this thing. Well, I can also train later if I do this and this now. Then that way I can train later. But then all of a sudden later doesn't work. It either doesn't happen at all, or you're too tired, you don't have any energy, or you go to the gym and it's packed. It's 5:30 at night, it's slammed, there's people everywhere, and you're like, gosh, this is a horrible experience. Why do I ever come at this time? I'm just leaving. When if you could have worked out at the planned time at, say, 1 or 2 in the afternoon, there'd be nobody in the gym. Gyms are pretty much dead around 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and you could have had a great workout. So mismanaging our to-dos, saying, I want to do X, Y, Z, but this comes in place, and this comes in, and that comes, and if I move this, and then all of a sudden we lose track of the day. These are things that are important. We have to have a priority list for people, and we have to have a list for our work, for what we want to accomplish that day. We have to schedule the biggest important things. Then they don't move. They're done. Once they're scheduled, they're done. You build and fill around them, but that's it. So I've talked about an analogy is if you have, 3 big stones, a couple pebbles, and then a bunch of sand, and you try to fit it into a glass jar. This is a weird analogy because I'm shortening a very long story. But again, you have 3 big stones, some pebbles, and some sand. If you pour the sand into the jar first, then you put the pebbles in, then you put the big stones in, you won't get the stones in. You won't. The best way to fill the jar is to put the stones in, then you pour in the pebbles, and then you pour in the sand. The reason why is the sand fills all the cracks and fills around the big things, but everything can fit. If you put the sand in first, you do the little piddly things first, all of a sudden there's no room in your day for the big things, the stones. What are your stones? What are the big things that you want to accomplish each day? If you truly want to accomplish them, and you say you do, you have to follow through with action. And you have to set those in stone, schedule them, and say, this is when they're done. Then I'm going to do kind of the next kind of important things kind of around them. That's the pebbles. And then I'll fill in piddly crap when I can. That's the sand. So I know for me, like I food prep in the morning. I have to get all my food ready for me and my wife for the day. And then I like listen to like a sermon and then an audiobook while I do that. So the food prep is the big thing. I do like the sermon and the audiobook. That's like pebbles. The sermon, maybe it's disrespectful to call that a pebble, but I can get that in at other times of the day. I just like getting it in at that time. So everything's built around the stone, the food prep. If I do the food prep, then I know I'll have the kind of uninterrupted mental space to do the sermon and to do the audiobook. And if I miss that, maybe I'll listen to a shorter sermon because I have different lengths of them available on podcasts while I drive. I have an 8-minute commute. I know everybody probably hates me because it's a very short commute, but I have an 8-minute commute and I have a sermon series thing that the sermon's like 2 or 3 minutes. So I can listen to 2 or 3 of those, get some like kind of thoughts for the day, little like lessons and things to work on, just a little bit of mental framework for the day. So that way I can kind of go through the day and staying connected and feeling like on point with what I want to do with my life. So I have ways, like my training is a stone. I have a time set for that. The podcast, I try to make a stone, but that sucker moves around from time to time. So there's a lot of stones. Like when you're my type of personality, everything feels like a stone. But you have to say, okay, what's going to get me the life that I want a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? For me, I'm going to care about the relationship with my wife, the relationship with my parents, and I do care about my business because my business is relationships with people. Those are my big things. Workouts, I can modify them. If I get a big workout in the gym, freaking awesome. But we also bought a cable stack at home. So we have a cable stack in our home office, and we have a Bowflex, this is like a vertical elliptical motion rather than a horizontal. Freaking crazy hard on the legs, kills your lungs in like 10-20 minutes. So love it. So if I need to, I'll just do 10 minutes on that thing, 10 minutes on the cable stack, and that's my workout for the day. So I have like layers to how I do things. But having lists and say, these are my priorities. This is the ranking of people. This is the ranking of crap I have to do today. And then knowing that ahead of time lessens anxiety when I run into moments where things conflict. When urgent things pop up, but they're not necessarily important. Not everything that's urgent is important. And that's tricky. You have to make sure you do the important things, and then things that aren't important but seem urgent, you just got to put pause on that, just wait till later. So one of the phrases, there's two phrases I use often in my mind is not my monkeys, not my circus. So if somebody has problems and I'm like, well, I could help you right now, but that would mean that I have to abandon everything I'd planned for the day and the people who are higher on the priority list. I would miss things for them. So I would say, you're running into problems. Things seem urgent to you, but not my monkeys, not my circus. So those are your monkeys. That's your craziness. Deal with that. I'll help you later on when I can. That sounds so cold. I understand. But it's how I'm going to balance the people and the stuff in my life and not lose my life feeling like I'm just reacting to everybody around me. I'll help people with their monkeys when I can, but I can't do it at the expense of my monkeys. We all have to manage our own monkeys and then get help from time to time. I just can't be managing everybody else's monkeys. Another phrase I like is don't let the inmates make the decision. So what I mean by this is if you're in an insane asylum and you ask the insane people what they want to do today, you're going to get a lot of weird answers, right? And the majority of the answers are not going to be actually good answers. So often in business and often in what I find in my life is there are decisions that have to be made. Sometimes I will make the decisions and then that's just the way it is. Because if you ask other people but they don't have your priorities in mind, they have their priorities in mind. That's okay. They should. But find a compromise and say, okay, I think this is what's best. I'm not going to ask them if it's what's best because they're going to operate on their priority lists. So we need to find a compromise. If they do not know what your priorities are, then they won't know where a compromise is and they'll just do what's best for them. So when you need to do something with somebody, communicate and say, hey, these are the things I want to do today. This is what's really important to me. Do you think we can fit it in here or here? And that's it. I just know, okay, these are the options that are best for me. I'm going to give those options. And then they're going to talk to me. They're going to tell me what's best for them. And then we'll find somewhere in the middle. But I'm not just going to let the other people make the decisions for me when they don't know anything about me and they don't know what's important to me. Because then they're just going to choose stuff that might not be best for me. And why would I not work to find something in the middle? I've talked already way too long because I have 4 more points I was supposed to go through. Oof, this is going to be long. So I'm going to go short through the other ones. But to learn more about priority lists, we do have podcast 1023. You can find all the podcasts I'm going to mention in today's podcast on our website, www.berlinergym.com. There's a podcast player on the site, and then also there's instructions on how to find older podcasts. Okay. So podcast 1023 is a mindset podcast titled Stress Management, Options, and Priorities. So listen to that. I promise it's going to help, which is why I talked about it for 17 minutes. It's definitely going to help. Okay, tip number 2. Drop the right ball. What this means is if I am juggling, and I'm juggling a couple glass balls and a couple rubber balls, I'm going to focus really freaking hard on those glass balls. Because if I drop a rubber one, it'll bounce back up. If I drop a glass one, it shatters. So podcast 251 is a mindset podcast titled Drop the Right Ball. And it's literally about that concept, is when you're trying to juggle a lot of things in life, they are not equal. Everything is going to feel like a stone, like I said earlier. Everything is going to feel like it's the most important thing. It's not. There are things that if you slow down, take a deep breath, there are things that are more important than other things. Okay? So of everything you're juggling, some of the things you're juggling are glass. They're super important and they do need your attention. Some of the things are rubber. You can drop it. You can delay it. You can lessen it. And it'll come back. So when you're struggling and you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're high with anxiety, is what in your mind right now that is just seeming overly overwhelming? What can just be delayed? What can be delayed? There's probably something that doesn't absolutely need to be done right now. And if you just delay it, whether it's a day, a couple hours, a couple weeks, a couple months, if you just delay it, can it give you some space? What can be lessened? What do you feel like is so overwhelming that it's enormous, and you're like, well, you know what? I don't have to do all of that right now. I can do some of it. So, for example, my wife and I are moving a storage unit from Charlotte down to Rock Hill, South Carolina. It's about 30-ish minutes, 30, 35 minutes, depending on the traffic, to the storage unit. And we found one that's only like 8 minutes away. And it's like, that'll be a lot better. It's cheaper. It's air conditioned, first floor, not third floor. And it's in just a better area of the world. So a little bit safer. So we wanted to move a storage unit. Well, the storage unit was everything my wife had for the last like 10 years. And it just got thrown in whenever she had the time to do it because crazy stress, life is nuts. So we're looking at that storage unit like, oh dear God. It's going to take forever. That's ridiculous. It's so overwhelming. So overwhelming. Well, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So we're like, okay, well, we'll go up there. The first day, we'll just pull out things we think are trash. Then we'll come home, we'll breathe, we'll relax, we'll do some other things we need to do. Then maybe next day or the next weekend, we'll go back up there and see, okay, what are the most important things that maybe we actually want to bring to the house? And we just took it piece by piece by piece, and it's done. A little bit at a time. So we lessened what felt like it was so overwhelming. We just broke it down into pieces. And then what can be regained? What can be regained? I remember for my wife and I, whenever her mother had a stroke in 2020, we had to move her from New Jersey down to South Carolina because she couldn't take care of herself. And at that time, me owning a gym, and my nature is I like to work out pretty much every day. Like I own a gym, so I love being in the gym, working out, like big, long, hard, aggressive workouts as many days as I can possibly do it. Like I'll train to the point where my body isn't recovering right, and then I'll force to take like a lesser day. I love training. I love working out. But at that time of life, it was just not feasible to spend, 2 hours in the gym if I wanted to. There was just more things going on. We had to drive from New Jersey down to South Carolina, back to New Jersey, blah, 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 blah. So my workouts turned into, okay, can I set a 5-minute timer and do bodyweight squats and push-ups? You'll be surprised how miserable bodyweight squats and push-ups can be in 5 minutes when you're trying to just not stop. Like we talked about, we started getting stuff at the house so we could do quick 10 or 20-minute workouts. So we had to kind of like drop off on our kind of physical fitness. We hit like the most minimum baseline that I've ever had in my entire life. But I knew it could be regained. If I just hit this baseline, I stay active for my mental health, then I'll come back and I'll regain my forward momentum. I'll push back forward and I'll get this. I'll get it going again. Now, I ate well the entire time, so like my off is not a typical off. It's just a hell of a lot less than what I'd really want. But I was looking at that like, okay, let me get through this season of life, and then I'll regain what I need to do. So that's the idea of drop the right ball, is everything you're trying to balance, it is not equal. It is not. If you take a couple seconds and you write them down. So there's an idea called a brain dump. And what that is basically a lot of anxiety feelings can be from just trying to balance a million things in your mind, and you're overwhelmed. So if you set a timer for 3 minutes and just write down every single thing that you have anxiety on, don't organize it, don't order it, don't rank it, just write down every single thing that you're like focused on. That's like taking some space in your mind. Every single thing. Write it down for 3 minutes. You'll automatically feel better. It just feels better getting it out of your head and on paper. Then you can start to organize it. So there's podcast 804, which is a mindset podcast titled Brain Dumps and Gratitude Journal. So definitely check that out. Really good one. But that's the idea. It's kind of write it all down. And then when you're looking at it on paper, you can compare. And you can say, okay, this is important. This one actually isn't as important. So you start to see, what are my glass balls? What are my rubber balls? The next tip we have is to focus on what you can control. There are things you can control about what you have anxiety over, and then there are things you cannot. There are more things within your control than you will have the ability to control. Yep, let me say that again. There are more things within your control than you will have the ability to control. So if you focus on what you can control, you will always be busy. You'll always be progressing, and you'll always have hope. Again, there are things you can control, and there are things you cannot. focus on what you can control. Podcast 976 is a Q&A podcast titled Own Your Choices. Own your choices, own your actions, own your life. Take control of what you can control. Find what's within your control and then control the hell out of it. The hell out of it. I work with people with eating disorders. And this is a kind of a funny example because it's actually kind of taken to the negative, is they'll control the shit out of their food and physical activity because they can't control something else. Maybe, if it's a younger adult, teens, maybe their parents going through a divorce, maybe they're going through being teased at school, they're going through a lot of shit. So they're like, okay, I can't control that, I'm freaking out, I'm overwhelmed. I'm gonna focus on what I can eat. I'm gonna eat so perfectly, so cleanly. I'm gonna be perfect with my food. I'm gonna be perfect with my physical activity. And it's something that they find that they can control, and it gives them a sense of control in a world that seems out of control. So we want to own our choices and realize that every single thing I do all day, everything I say, everything I don't do is a choice. And if I make better choices, I can get better outcomes. Doesn't mean I'm making bad choices. It just means if I focus on making better choices. If I look at what choices I make and say, ooh, can I improve this? Ooh, can I improve this? Ooh, can I do that? Can I do this? Can I do that? If you figure out what's more and more within your control, you can build an amazing life in spite of the things you cannot control. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you react to them. Not initially. Don't worry if you have a shitty initial reaction. But bounce back. Get control over it and say, okay, this happened to me, freaked out a little bit, but I'm back on track. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to find my way through this. So it's important to focus on what you can control because there's more to control than what you can actually do. So just focus on that. You'll be busy all the time. If you're busy, you're going to make progress. If you're busy, you're going to have hope. So own every single choice you make. Try to blame yourself for everything. Because if you are responsible for stuff, then you can make changes and change it. So it sounds ironic, and I'm saying it, aggressive for a purpose. But if there's something that's happening and you don't like it, don't blame other people because you're giving power to them. You can say, hey, it's because of you that this is happening, but I can control this. I can control this. So I'm going to do those things in spite of you. I'm still going to advance. I'm still going to progress. I'm still going to make my best life. Own your choices. It's podcast 976. And then, so you don't develop some kind of crazy disorder, there's a balance that's needed. So when you own your choices and you start trying to make the best choices possible, it's important to focus on progress, not perfection. You will never be perfect, but you can make progress. That's a balance you have to make. Podcast 488 is a mindset podcast titled Brutal Honesty, Tough Love, Balance. You need to be tough with yourself, and you need to love yourself. And those can feel like they're on opposite ends at times. You're either too tough and not enough love, or you're too lovey-dovey and you're not tough enough. It's a hard balance, but it can be balanced. Podcast 488 teaches you how to do that. Okay, tip number 4 is to create a plan. So once you start realizing, okay, I have my priority lists, I've now focused in on which balls I want to focus on. What are my glass, what are my rubber ones? I say, okay, now that I know what my glass balls are, I know what the most important things are for me. What can I control within each of those? What do I have influence over? Now that I'm here, I need to create a plan. How am I going to exert my influence? How am I going to make something happen? What am I going to do about this? Focusing your energy is really, really important. Unfocused energy will eat you up. It will tear you apart. So you need to focus your energy so that way you actually gain from the energy. Energy spent on worrying gains nothing. Energy spent on freaking crushing what's within your control gains you everything. It's very, very important to focus your energy. What are you going to do each day to address those glass balls? Right? Tip number 5 is to do it. Stay focused. Stay focused. Track your plan. You made a plan of daily tasks. Now track what you're doing. Track if you're actually doing them. Who gives a shit what your plan is if you ain't doing it? I write nutrition and training plans for people all the time. If they don't follow them, then what I did by writing the training and nutrition plan does absolutely nothing. It threw my life away. I've wasted part of my life writing that. And I'll never gain it back. My life is thrown away if people don't do that nutrition and training program. That's wild. Maybe it's an aggressive way to look at it, but that's what I look at it. And the reason why I look at it, because I know that that's true for myself. I can write the most perfect training program. I used to sit in school when I should have been paying attention and trying to write like the perfect workout splits. You know, like Monday I would train chest, but if I balance that with biceps and the middle deltoids, blah, 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 then I'll try to figure out like the most perfect split, for how to organize my body parts during the week. None of that meant anything if I didn't actually do the damn stuff. If I make a plan, I have to do the damn plan for it to be worthwhile. Just making of plans does absolutely nothing. Throwing away your time. So you have to actually do them. And in order to do them well, you have to track what you're doing. Track your daily habits. Track what you do. And then also, help yourself out. Have tiers, T-I-E-R-S, if I'm spelling that correctly, tiers of accomplishment, tiers of what you can do. So for each thing that you want to be able to do, what's like your best day scenario? What's your good enough scenario? And then what's the scenario where you're like, well, at least it was something. Podcast 916 is a mindset podcast titled Flexible Habits. And that one teaches, okay, if I want to do X today, what's my best X I can do? Or, well, if I can't get that, what's a good enough X? Or, if I have the worst day ever, what's, at least it was something? What's the smallest amount of X I can do, and at least it was something? It's very important to do that, because you will never be able to predict how every day goes. But you can predict how you respond to each day. And having options for your response pre-planned will allow you to know exactly what to do when you face that, rather than feeling uncertain, then all of a sudden the day's gone and you didn't do anything. Podcast 916. Okay? So those are my 5 tips. That's how I kind of try to best manage my life, is have people and priority lists to know what matters most. Drop the right ball. If I'm going to try to juggle everything in the world, what's the most important things that I have to maintain? Then what are things that can be delayed, lessened, or regained later on? I need to focus on what I can control, because there's sure shit enough that I'll be busy. I need to create a plan, and then I need to stay focused and do the plan. So what future do you want? What can you do to create that future? Focus your energy on those things, on what you can do. Now, if you cannot find an answer, if you cannot find a way to influence what you're struggling with, read books, listen to books, watch videos, and get help. Invest into knowledge, invest into awareness. Find people who know more than you do if you're struggling with limitations of what you know. That's where, coaches or counselors or therapists, they all can help. Anxiety, if not managed, it will steal your life. You will lose your life. You don't get any second that you've ever had in life back. Every second that you spend is gone. If you spend your life worrying, stressed, fearful, inactive, you will lose your life. But anxiety, if managed, can help create a life unimaginable. High achievers in life, when they've done studies on high achievers have the highest rate of anxiety. The most successful people in the world have the most anxiety. Does that surprise you? There are thousands of studies that prove that. The most successful people in life struggle with the highest levels of anxiety. They don't want to fail, so they work. And they work. And they work. And they work. And they grind. And they learn. And they find what they can do. And then they do the hell out of it. That's how you can best approach anxiety. Put it to work. Put it to work. Focus on what you can do. And then do it to the best of your absolute abilities, and then continue to build on those abilities. Anxiety, if not managed, will steal your life. Anxiety, if managed, will help you create an amazing life. If you're struggling, consider getting therapy. It's helpful to have somebody who listens. It's helpful to have an outlet to organize and speak on your thoughts. That's why brain dumps are so helpful. When you have to express what you're thinking, it organizes what you're thinking. And with organization comes lessened chaos, right? That's why a lot of people with anxiety want to have clean houses. Why they want everything to be neat and orderly. Because your environment, if chaotic, breeds chaos in your mind. So organize your thoughts. Get your thoughts out on paper. Get your thoughts out to a therapist. Get your thoughts out to somebody. And help it become more organized. Okay? Well, this is a long one, but I do hope that there were some benefits in here. I hope that there was something you can take away from this, and it'll help you in some way. I appreciate everybody listening to the podcast. Absolutely, absolutely blessed beyond belief to have this podcast and to have a platform to help people. Thank you very, very much. I truly appreciate it. If you need anything, email me at brutalirongym@gmail.com. Okay? Well, if you think today's podcast is helpful, please share it. Please share it on social media. Share it with a friend. Share it however you can. Just let people know that there's a resource out there for free to help them with stress and anxiety, or help them with nutrition, help them with training, help them with anything that'll help them live a healthier and happier life. Just let them know about the podcast. Then thank you to those who donate to support the podcast financially. It does have a high hosting cost every year. I give an hour to it every day. I really appreciate the donations. Even just $5 a month, it absolutely does add up, and it absolutely does help. If you want to donate, you can do so on our website, www.brutalirongym.com. Then if you like the information we share in our podcast, you can always find more from us on social media. So find us and follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.